Right, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn webinar, Dynamics NAV Upgrades, Avoiding Landmines and Achieving Success, brought to you by Archer Point. If you're on an older version of NAV, you've probably noticed it. Your reports are starting to run slower, your customizations aren't as flexible anymore, or you realize your company is not fully covered with the latest fraud protections. Here at Archer Point, we've heard a variety of reasons people choose to avoid upgrading their Dynamics NAV software. And then unfortunately, upgrading becomes a crisis situation. We'd like to help you avoid these crisis situations. Our presenter today, Christian Haynes, a NAV veteran with over 20 years experience with custom development, will explain how being proactive with an NAV upgrade will help set your company up for success. Christian will walk through some of the common landmines awaiting companies on older versions of NAV. We will offer Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please either type your questions in the questions pane of your GoToWebinar console as we go along, or use the raise your hand option to ask your question verbally during the Q&A. I will announce the person asking the question and unmute your line at that time. So let's go ahead and get started. Christian, over to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Let me give you a little bit about my background because it's really going to have an impact in today's discussion. Most of my career, I have been an in-house development resource. During this time, I was employed by 3 large international companies using NAV in various business sectors. My first experience was using Navision 2.6 for a company with a large warehouse and multiple distribution centers providing their manufactured products to retail locations. The next company, we progressed from NAV 3.7 up through NAV 5, and we did these in facilities that did retail, service, and rental that was located in over 12 countries around the world. Knowing this, I can say I have seen most of these landmines that we'll cover today personally. So for our agenda, we want to uncover the hidden risks of staying on an outdated version. We also want to discuss the value you get by being on a current version of NAV. So in this presentation, we will go over several common landmines and how you can avoid them. So talking about these NAV landmines, when multiple core functions of your business rely on Dynamics NAV, you want to keep it in tip-top condition so you can avoid the potential landmines. If you think about it, your customer data, financials, inventory, all of these areas of your business are critical. They need to be operational every day. So let's go ahead and start talking about these individual landmines. Our first one deals with table locking. Do you or your customers have peak hours? Or do you have a large number of postings that need to run without blocking other users? If so, then you may have experienced your screen freezing for several seconds, minutes even, until the order is processed. If you've experienced this table locking, this is an indication that you are on an older version of NAV. This issue was first addressed by Microsoft in version 2013, and then they've done further improvements in NAV 2015 and 2016. So here is an illustration to help show the difference between the code as far as when the locking of tables occurred between versions 2009 and older versus how Microsoft changed things in 2013. So a typical example would be posting a purchase receipt. And if you look at our timeline across the top, it shows it can take a little over 2 seconds. The important piece here is when that GL lock starts. In 2009, if we take a look at the first red line there, it occurs before the inventory posting routine. That inventory posting routine takes upwards of about 2 seconds time. However, in 2013, Microsoft improved the process by moving the lock to occur after that post to inventory and just before that final piece that occurs at when it returns control back to you, and that's when it actually posts to your GL. So why is this important? The process done in 2009 is fine if you are the only one using the system. As the number of your active users increase, the probability of locking tables and records where others try to access at the same time goes up. This is pretty much your standard definition of a table lock that pops that warning message on your user screen. Bottom line is, on older NAV versions, your productivity time is held ransom. Our next landmine is slow processing. Microsoft has fundamentally improved the code structure of Dynamics NAV to make it run faster and more efficient. These improvements include a 3-tiered architecture, increased caching efficiency, and all code executes on the server side. Now, corrections for this were first introduced in 2013, and additional performance improvements were made in NAV 2016. The service tier that was introduced in NAV 2009 for the Roll-Tailor client, and in 2009 Classic, slowness was not an issue because you weren't ever using the 3rd tier. However, if you started using the Roll-Tailor client, performance can be an issue. And why? The 3-tiered architecture, also sometimes referred to as an NST, Navision Service Tier, was 32-bit. That would allow you to have access to 30 to 40 users per service. In 2013, that NST was updated to be 64-bit, meaning it can now handle 175 to 200 users per service. In NAV 2016, the Windows client moved to 64-bit. Now, this mainly helped is around reporting by not having the processing pushed back down to the client level. Slow and difficult reports. Microsoft has significantly improved the report process with the 64-bit client in NAV 2016, giving the ability to create dynamically linked spreadsheets and KPI dashboards. Companies can now get Microsoft's Power BI, which is a portal solution, and JetExpress, an Excel-based reporting tool. These examples, Microsoft offers those for free. The reporting was first improved in version 2009, and then they have continually made improvements right up through the latest version of NAV 2016. Power BI was introduced with NAV 2015, and then JetExpress was provided and introduced for free in 2009, also with continued improvements the whole way. Our next landmine is we can't utilize new functionality. So issues are about taking advantage of Microsoft's regularly released cumulative updates, the ability to use Microsoft's new enhancements, for example, posting preview, deferral accounting, the ability to save NAV documents as a PDF, cash flow analysis, workflow, electronic documents, and many more things. Also, new compliant regulations need to be addressed. In addition to these factors, with an upgrade to the latest version, you get a free version of Jet Reports, making your reporting even easier. You get full integration with the Microsoft Office suite. Our next landmine is non-compliance. Several industries have been impacted by additional regulations in the recent years. Failure to comply could result in severe penalties. Several of these regulations include, but are not limited to, the PCI DSS compliance for companies employing credit card technology, HIPAA for healthcare companies, Sarbanes-Oxley's for companies that deal with audits, and ISO for manufacturing companies. So while many of these compliance issues may be managed by a third-party solution, integrating with the latest version of those ISV solutions can become problematic with older versions of NAV. Our next landmine, fraud protection. With Positive Pay, Microsoft has developed a solution that makes sure your bank only clears validated checks and amounts. You can export a Positive Pay file that contains vendor information, check number, and payment amount, which you send to the bank for reference when you process payments. This banking feature creates a Positive Pay file with payment information to send to your bank. Default formats are provided for Citibank and Bank of America. There is a layout builder for others. Maintain Positive Pay history to view summary and detail for later reference. This feature can be found on the bank account card in the NAV 2016 action menu. Alan Lykowskis from ArcherPoint wrote a blog about using this feature. It's called Positively Positive, how to set up and use the Positive Pay feature in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2016. And Suzanne should be sending the link across to your chat window now.
Yes, it is in your chat window, ladies and gentlemen, and your GoToWebinar console.
Our next landmine is training and support. As newer versions of NAV are released, support and training resources for older editions are slowly faded away. And this is an impact because the number of developer and consulting resources will drastically decrease. Microsoft only supports the 3 most recent releases, and Microsoft support for legacy editions is significantly reduced. Probably the easiest way for everyone to grasp that is if I illustrate with an example. So today, our current release is NAV 2016. That means Microsoft supports NAV 2016, NAV 2015, NAV 2013. So when NAV 2017 is released, support for NAV 2013 will stop. Also, while ArcherPoint has a long history of working with Navision, our new resources are only trained on the latest releases. And as much as some of us may not like to admit it, the rest of us that have been doing it for a long time, we're not exactly getting any younger. Our next landmine is locked into old technology. So as your business moves forward and additional devices are needed, whether that's workstations, POS, tablets, servers, scanners, your business could experience extensive downtime or inability to expand technological resources. One customer example is we have a client that had purchased Dynamics CRM. However, they were still using NAV 5.0 and they wanted to integrate the CRM but couldn't. The reason why is that a new version of CRM and the architecture is too different to be integrated. CRM used Pages, and for those of you that are on NAV 5 and older or 2009 that use the classic client, then you know it's just forms. Yet, so CRM on Pages, NAV 5 on Forms, there's no way the two of these were going to be able to interact. The other problem was the reports that are available. In NAV 5 and older, that newer style of reporting called RDLC isn't even available. So it's completely incompatible. And continuing, so Dynamics NAV is now more flexible with several client and hosting solutions. So let's talk about the first one, Native SQL Azure. It is a hosted solution. Azure provides the option to move your ERP to the cloud and save money from hardware investments. With Azure, you pay for what you use, which can adjust up or down as needed. This would be ideal if you have a seasonal business. Second thing, event and extensions. making future upgrades easier. So consider with Base Nav, it becomes a plug and play with extensions available to partners and ISVs to manage their solutions. In prior versions of Nav, any developer, partner, or ISV could change Base Nav code. This caused upgrades to be extensive. And exactly what are extensions? They're code modifications not allowed in extension packages. This is intended to remove the code merge task during an upgrade, and it helps increase the probability that different extensions can coexist. So if you think about buying multiple add-on packages, same thing. Those different add-on packages are extensions, and they can coexist without changing your base code. Changes to a Microsoft Dynamics Nav deployment by an extension are treated differently than if you had done it the old way and manually added them to your base code. In Microsoft Dynamics Nav 2016, not all core concepts are supported. Microsoft focused on establishing a strong foundation for the extensions that includes the most important and most commonly used elements of an add-on, such as pages, tables, code units, and your menu suites. And now let's go back to that final point on there, additional client options. So starting in Nav 2013, the additional clients were Windows, SharePoint, and web clients became available. Then also starting in Nav 2015 and continuing in 2016, Microsoft released the smartphone and tablet app, allowing companies to utilize Nav on the go. So in 2015, it became an option of using a mobile client. In 2016, the mobile client was also made available to run on your phone, so you weren't stuck with it just being on a tablet. Also, the full Windows client works just fine over the internet, whereas before you could only run what was considered a very thin web client. While you may never have thought to do business on your phone or tablet beyond email, the new mobile client allows you to expand your operations with ease. A couple quick examples. Let's look at you have a service technician. Well, they can now use their phone to update their nav ticket at the end of a service call. Or while on site, sales can use their mobile device to create and email a quote to the client. We've also seen other clients use tablets in the warehouse or on the shop floor to improve productivity. Basically, the possibilities are endless. Our next landmine, can't integrate with other solutions. As your business grows, your nav system may need to integrate with other applications. Nav Web Services makes nav data and functionality available to a variety of external systems. This tends to be most prevalent with trading partners that require web services. Great example is purchase orders and shipping cost calculations. Anyone that ships things in and out, you're going to deal with FedEx, U.S. Post Office, or UPS. Most of those are some type of web service. Starting with the release of 2009 RTC and expanding further with 2013 R2 is everything around your web services and how well it became integrated. Prior to 2009, if you were trying to interact with a web service, it's some type of custom code that you're doing or needs to be done that emulates a web service. 2009 can be considered sort of a hybrid service, but 2013 really was the start of true web services in Nav, offering multiple methods to implement. Sorry, I don't know if there's any developers or others on the call right now, but things using like OData or SOAP, those are just couple of the methods that are available. All right. Another thing with integrations is certain ISV providers only provide updates and new versions to current nav additions. So certain versions may be required based on an outside connector. An example I was given is Lanham's eShip. It requires a certain version of nav when connecting to some third-party services. And one of those third-party services is the UPS link accounts. If you aren't on a certain version of nav, you can't update your UPS link accounts. Another thing to think about is if you're running an older version of nav and you've got a third-party add-on from an ISV, what happens if the ISV no longer exists? So another landmine, maintain business solutions. As your other business applications from Microsoft Office to your CRM get updates, your nav installation may lose support. We already talked about the one client that got the newer version of CRM, no longer would work with their version of nav5. So there are many other examples of things like that out there. Another thing to consider is even ArcherPoint at times has issues getting support from Microsoft from older versions of nav. It's just patches, updates, things of that nature, again, coming from Microsoft, is not even readily available to us. Here's a good landmine. Too much manual effort. As you process more transactions over time, you can spend lots of extra time manual tasks that can be automated with new nav and add-on versions. For example, these can include electronic banking, starting with NAV 2013, workflows 2016, built-in online services for banking, also in 2016, the ability to email documents from within NAV, utilizing Rapid Start so you can import data updates, or your company expands and you need to create a new company and you want to quickly move a lot of your base settings from a current company to the new one. Rapid Start lets you do that. This next slide I'm going to bring up here in just a second. This was a case study with one of our clients, and something to think about. What they did is they're showing some of their potential time savings, and they monetized it due to reductions in keystrokes, complexity, or speed increases at where they went from NAV 2009 R2 up to the latest release of NAV. And, you know, again, I don't know how much you really want me to go through and read all the data, but it's there. You're going to have access to this. Go back through and take a look. Bottom line, the upgrade is going to allow them to save approximately $40,000 a year just in manual labor at processing paperwork. So, of course, all this sounds good, right? Isn't upgrading difficult, expensive, and time-intensive? It doesn't have to be. ArcherPoint's upgrade process starts with an analysis to discover the best upgrade path for your installation. So our process is very comprehensive to ensure the smoothest upgrade possible. First thing we do is we scope the entire project first by learning your requirements and determining if an upgrade or a reimplementation is the best fit for you. Next, report usage is logged to help determine what is actually being used and needs to be moved forward, replaced, or left behind. Then an analysis is done to determine what custom code and/or add-ons may no longer be needed due to new functionality, or it does need to be moved forward. So in our next one here, our upgrade execution, what happens? So in this process, a test upgrade and merge is done. Then they provide a test instance to you, and you'll go through and you'll test it. And then you send back any type of errors you get. They'll make adjustments and then update your test and continue to work through the cycle until it meets your acceptance. And finally, upgrade and go live. What ArcherPoint likes to do is we like to schedule that so that your data conversion starts on a Friday, goes through Sunday, and then come Monday morning, you're up on your new version, you're ready to go live. One thing I would like to point out on this slide, those first three steps are upgrade scope, our report analysis review, our upgrade analysis. You notice all three of those are the same color. The reason why is technically they're all related and they can run in parallel. I wanted to show them out to make sure you understood the different processes as far as what happens, but it is possible in the right circumstance they could be running at the same time. Again, even heavily customized solutions can be upgraded at a low cost with events, extensions, and new native functionality. Data warehouses can be used to store your historical data if needed. Keep in mind, this applies to upgrades after you've moved up to 2016. Another thing is financing is available for NAV upgrade projects. And most importantly, can you afford to live through a NAV failure? Are there any questions? And then Suzanne, at that, I'll give it back to you unless you have some questions for me to answer.
Yes, we do. So first of all, while I compiled our questions from the audience, I do have one. If there are any other examples that you can provide that you encountered or landmines that you encountered as a user. I know that you were in the user space for quite some time, and anything else you can think of that were landmines that you encountered?
Sure. Now this one here, we could probably talk for hours alone with some of the things I've seen with different companies. I'll try to keep this one brief. Let's see, probably one of the most important ones I can recall, table locking. Again, this was a company I worked for. Part of this, yes, it was NAV. Part of it was their business processes and how they handled their workflow. But because of how they handled their workflow, it very much accentuated the problems that you can get with table locking. And what this was, the company had 17 plus dealerships in Germany, and this bad business process they like to follow was their service department, you know, as they're writing up the service orders and that, the manager would look this stuff over by hand fill things in. They kept everything on paper sorted to the side of the system, and then they saved everything for like the last 2 or 3 days of the month, at where it became a major rush to get all these invoices in the system and posted. And I can tell you, some of these locations, we're talking big service centers, they might have thousands of service tickets with, you know, 40, 50 different lines of parts being posted and all these other things occurring in there across, as I said, 17 plus locations. So thousands and thousands of postings just in service, just one right after another, hitting a button. And I can recall at the end of the month, we'd start getting phone calls from Germany going, oh, we got a table lock up on the screen, it's blocking everybody out. What do we do? What do we do? And they'd start going around and around trying to find out who had the lock, what was going on, and other things we could do. Now, they started at 3.7. They moved up to NAV4. They moved up to NAV5. I did finally convince management after a lot of discussions on this and showing them the reason why it was happening partly was exacerbated by their process. They did change the process, and a lot of it was greatly alleviated. However, the locking would still occur just because they had a lot of users. The Germany location, I want to say they had about 225 named users, and they had most of those in working all the time. This was a SQL location, as I said, I mean 3, 7, 4, and 5. So those of you on the older systems with bigger amounts of users, you probably already know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kristen. Do you have a couple questions from the audience? First one from Peter. He wants to know what's the difference between the newly released Positive Pay and the Positive Pay features that are available in older versions of NAV? And I'll actually take that one if you'd like.
Yeah, please go
because
ahead.
it's my understanding that Positive Pay was not in NAV, that it was all custom. So if you've got Positive Pay features, that's probably some custom code, Peter.
Another thing I would recommend is, again, Alan's blog.
Yeah,
Go out and take a look at it. He does a pretty good job of trying to walk down through and show you some of those things that are new. Yeah, so that alone may answer your questions better than we can on this call.
We got some more questions coming in here. Marco would like to know what is the average duration for a significant upgrade, i.e. 2009 to 2016? Is it talking weeks, months, or what? Are you familiar with that time frame?
I don't really have that answer. I wish I had someone from the upgrade team that could answer it, because I know dealing with some of the older versions, and I believe 2009 is one of them you have to do it. It can be a multiple step process where some of the older ones you have to upgrade to 2009, and then I believe from 2009 you have to go to 13. Once you're at 13, you can do that bigger jump up. But it's around that 2009 and 2013. It's a sort of a multi-step process.
Yeah, and a lot of that goes on behind the scenes, right? I mean, that's all done here internally. So.
And that's what I was going to say is they've got some really great tools that allow them to pull out, you know, like if you're on 2009 and say you're on R2, they can pull out what is a base package of 2009. Then they'll take a look at any add-ons you have, and they're able to pull that the delta of the code, the changes in the code, and then they can compare all of that with your system, and that comes back and tells them, okay, here's what we have, here's all our differences, and then they can do those same comparisons to the other pieces. And my understanding for those using those tools today, they can work through that pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I would.
Is it possible, Susan, for us?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend, and it depends greatly on customers' availability. It depends. You know, I would gather
level of customization.
4 to 8 months, right? It depends on number of customizations. It depends on your availability. There's a lot of factors, obviously, that can impact it. So if you've got a time frame, you know, it's best to kind of start planning in advance and get that initial assessment done so that you have a much better idea of what the actual time would take for your particular upgrade. Next on our list here we have, and I can answer this one, is Microsoft 2017 expected to be released, and that is actually coming up. I think general availability will either be in October or November. The Directions conference is going on this week, and in 2 weeks is NAVUG Summit, and there'll be a lot of sharing about what's in the latest release, and typically they make it available for general release around this time frame every year. So it's always in the fall when they make their next major release, Marco. Another question that we have coming in, they're on 2009 R2, and they have a lot of little customizations and a few large customizations. One of the larger customizations involves communicating with XML web services to retrieve and input shipping information. From his understanding, the XML was written by someone that is no longer employed by Archer Point. How different are customizations, and do they need to be completely reconstructed? I would say no. They shouldn't need to be completely reconstructed. You know, there's been a set of development standards within NAV for quite some time. If they were developed by an Archer Point employee, I know that we're one of the partners that do adhere to those standards. And while some of the tools have changed, those standards really haven't. Unless I've got that wrong, Christian.
No, you're absolutely correct. And the other thing I'd add to that is, as a developer and knowing many of the others on the team, pretty much about everybody knows how to build the XMLs.
Yeah.
Whether inbound, outbound, there may be some people that have more of a specialty dealing with some of the setups of special web services or something of that nature when it comes to what may need to be done with your infrastructure and not necessarily the code in your nav system, but there are plenty of people with Archer Point that can still help you with it.
Yes, and we can basically bring forward all of those customizations. The question really is around, do they need to be based on the new features available in the latest release? So good question. And we actually, to add to that, our, you know, we have a team that is solely dedicated to NAV upgrades and have been for quite a few years now, right? That's all they do day in and day out. They specialize in upgrades. Upgrades are different than doing customizations within NAV. And they've developed actually some custom tools that we use. One of them is to, it's a custom analysis to determine, you know, what's available in the new releases, and helps our clients determine, you know, what they might want to eliminate, right, due to it now being native. So an easy tool that helps us easily identify what you may not want to bring forward. All right, let me just check and see. We have any other questions here? I think that we have answered everything. If you think of any questions, let me see if I have a comment. So I think that's it, everyone. If you think of some questions that come up later on, by all means, please send them to info@archerpoint.com. We'll get them answered, or I think most of you have my email address. You can send it directly to me. I'll make sure that we get your questions answered. If you're interested in pursuing an upgrade analysis, by all means, contact your Archer Point contact manager or account manager, contact me, or again, info@archerpoint.com. We'd also like your feedback on this particular Lunch and Learn event. So thank you so much for setting aside some time in your busy day for the webinar, and we hope you consider it time well spent. Again, I want to thank everyone for their questions. Thank you, Christian, for your presentation. And with that, this concludes today's session. Have a great afternoon.